Most people think intimacy fails because of a lack of attraction. That's almost never the real reason. It fails because of what's missing underneath: presence, confidence, clarity, and safety. We're taught to focus on techniques, on doing more, trying harder, being better. But desire doesn't respond to effort the way we think it does. It responds to stability, to attention, to the feeling that nothing needs to be forced. Men don't beg for perfection. They beg for relief from pressure, from confusion, from emotional unpredictability. They want to feel chosen without being tested, understood without being managed, safe without being controlled. When presence replaces performance, confidence replaces insecurity, communication replaces guessing, and emotional safety replaces tension, intimacy stops feeling fragile. It becomes grounded, sustainable, real. This isn't about learning a trick. It's about understanding what actually creates desire and why most people unknowingly push it away. Most people misunderstand what presence actually means. They hear the word and assume it's about slowing down physically or paying attention in a vague, polite way. But presence isn't passive. It's not just being in the room. It's being mentally and emotionally anchored in what you're doing without drifting into performance, anxiety, or self-judgment. And this is where intimacy, real intimacy, either deepens or completely collapses. When men talk about what they want, especially in private, they rarely say they want someone who's technically perfect. What they're responding to is whether the person in front of them is actually there, not distracted, not trying to impress, not running a script in their head about what they should do next. Presence communicates something fundamental. I'm choosing this moment. I'm choosing you. I'm not somewhere else mentally. Psychologically, this matters more than people like to admit. The human nervous system is incredibly sensitive. We subconsciously pick up on hesitation, tension, and self-consciousness. If you're overthinking, the other person feels it, even if they can't explain why. Presence, on the other hand, signals safety and confidence. It tells the other person that nothing needs to be rushed, proven, or forced. A lot of people confuse effort with value. They think the more they do, the more desirable they become. But desire doesn't work like a checklist. It's not triggered by activity, it's triggered by awareness. When someone is fully present, their attention becomes rare, and rarity creates value. In a world where everyone is distracted, someone who can focus deeply stands out immediately. This is why presence beats performance every time. Performance is outward-facing. It's concerned with how you're being evaluated. Presence is inwardly stable. It doesn't ask, am I doing this right? It asks, am I actually here? That shift alone changes everything about how you're perceived. From a philosophical standpoint, presence is about responsibility. It's the decision to fully inhabit your role in the moment instead of escaping into excuses, expectations, or fantasies. When you're present, you're not hiding behind technique. You're exposed, but grounded. And paradoxically, that exposure is what creates strength. Men in particular respond to this because it removes pressure. They don't feel like they're being tested or managed. They feel met. Presence communicates acceptance without complacency. It says, I see you and I'm not trying to control you. That's deeply disarming. There's also something important to understand about masculine psychology here. Men are often conditioned to perform, to achieve, to prove, to provide. When intimacy becomes another arena where they feel evaluated, desire shuts down. But when they sense genuine presence, the dynamic shifts. They're no longer defending their worth. They're allowed to simply experience. And this is where many people unintentionally sabotage connection. They bring anxiety into moments that require steadiness. They rush because silence feels uncomfortable. They overcompensate because stillness feels risky. But stillness is where presence lives. It's where authenticity has space to emerge. Presence also requires self-regulation. You can't be present if you're emotionally reactive or constantly seeking reassurance. This is why confidence and presence are inseparable. Confidence isn't arrogance, it's emotional stability. It's knowing that you don't need to be impressive to be valuable. When you internalize that, your attention naturally shifts outward instead of looping inward. Think about how rare it is to feel truly listened to. Not interrupted, not analyzed, just heard. That feeling alone can create intimacy without a single physical action. Presence has gravity. It pulls people towards you because it's calming and validating at the same time. There's also a neurological layer to this. When someone feels genuinely attended to, their nervous system relaxes. Stress hormones drop, trust increases, desire follows. This isn't poetic language, it's biology. Presence literally changes how the body responds. What's interesting is that presence can't be faked for long. You can mimic behaviors, but attention always leaks. If you're not actually grounded, it shows. This is why the work is internal before it's external. You don't cultivate presence by learning tricks. You cultivate it by becoming comfortable with yourself in silence, in uncertainty, and in closeness. This is where philosophy quietly enters the conversation. Presence is a form of integrity. It's alignment between thought, emotion, and action. When those are fractured, people feel it. When they're aligned, connection feels effortless. And this ties directly into the rest of the message. Confidence becomes possible only when you stop performing. Communication becomes clearer when you're actually listening instead of waiting to respond. Emotional safety emerges when someone senses they don't have to be on guard. Presence is the foundation that makes everything else work. Without presence, techniques feel hollow. With presence, even simple moments carry weight. This is why men don't beg for complexity, they beg for authenticity, often without knowing how to articulate it. If you want to be unforgettable, stop trying to be impressive. Learn to be present, because the moment you fully show up without pretending, without rushing, without hiding, you become impossible to replace. And the question to leave yourself with is simple but uncomfortable when it matters most. Are you actually there, or just performing the idea of being there? Confidence is one of the most misunderstood traits in modern conversations about attraction and intimacy. People often mistake it for dominance, boldness, or outward assertiveness. They imagine confidence as something loud, something you perform so others can see it. But real confidence is quiet, it's internal, and most importantly, it's stable. It doesn't fluctuate based on approval, reaction, or outcome. At its core, confidence is comfort with yourself. Not a perfect self, not an idealized version of who you wish you were, but the person you actually are in the moment. When someone is confident, they're not constantly monitoring how they're coming across. They're not asking, am I enough? Because they've already answered that question internally. That internal resolution is what other people feel. Psychologically, confidence functions like an anchor. When you're anchored, your emotions don't swing wildly based on external feedback. You don't panic when there's silence. You don't rush to fill space. You don't interpret neutrality as rejection. And that emotional steadiness is deeply attractive because it creates a sense of reliability. People relax around those who are grounded. Men in particular respond strongly to this kind of confidence because it removes a familiar burden. Many men live under constant pressure to perform, to succeed, to initiate, to lead, to get things right. When they encounter someone who is internally secure, the dynamic shifts. They don't feel like they're being evaluated. They feel like they're being met, and being met is rare. There's also an important philosophical distinction here between confidence and validation seeking. Validation seeking is outward facing. It asks, do you approve of me? Confidence is inward facing. It asks, do I approve of myself? When your sense of worth depends on another person's response, you become reactive. You adjust yourself to maintain approval. And that adjustment over time erodes attraction because it signals instability. Confidence, by contrast, doesn't need to convince. It doesn't chase, it doesn't negotiate its value, it simply exists. And that existence communicates something powerful. I'm not here because I need you to complete me. I'm here because I choose to be. Choice is attractive. Neediness is not. This doesn't mean confidence is cold or detached. That's another common misconception. Secure confidence allows for warmth, vulnerability, and openness because it's not afraid of being seen. Insecure confidence hides behind masks, sarcasm, over-sexualization, over-accommodation. Real confidence doesn't need armor. There's a paradox here that's worth paying attention to. The more you try to appear confident, the less confident you tend to be. That effort itself signals doubt. True confidence emerges when you stop managing perception and start managing yourself. It's less about how you appear and more about how regulated you are internally. This regulation matters because intimacy amplifies emotional states. If you're insecure, intimacy magnifies that insecurity. If you're grounded, intimacy magnifies that groundedness. You can't hide from yourself in close connection. Whatever you bring into it gets louder. Confidence also influences how boundaries function. A confident person doesn't over-explain their limits. They don't apologize for having preferences. They don't collapse when someone disagrees or pulls away. They understand that rejection isn't a verdict on their worth, it's information. That mindset alone changes how interactions unfold. From a psychological perspective, this signals self-trust, and self-trust is foundational. If you don't trust your own judgment, emotions, or desires, you'll constantly look to others for direction. That creates imbalance. Confidence restores balance because it places responsibility back where it belongs, within yourself. Men are particularly sensitive to this because imbalance often shows up as pressure. When one person is unsure of themselves, the other person is subtly expected to compensate, to reassure, to lead emotionally, to stabilize the interaction. Over time, that becomes exhausting. Confidence removes that burden. It says, "You don't have to carry me." There's also something deeply attractive about someone who can tolerate discomfort without collapsing. Confidence isn't the absence of fear or doubt, it's the ability to function despite them. It's staying present when things aren't perfectly smooth. It's not panicking when expectations aren't immediately met. This is where confidence connects back to presence. When you're confident, you don't abandon the moment to manage anxiety. You stay, you listen, you respond instead of react. That responsiveness feels intentional, and intention feels meaningful. Philosophically, confidence is an expression of self-respect. It's the decision to treat yourself as someone whose experience matters. When you respect yourself, you don't overextend to earn affection. You don't shrink to avoid conflict. You don't perform roles that feel inauthentic. And authenticity, again, is what people respond to. It's important to say this clearly. Confidence is not arrogance. Arrogance is fragile. It needs constant reinforcement. It can't tolerate challenge. Confidence is resilient. It doesn't need to dominate because it isn't threatened. That difference is obvious to anyone paying attention. In intimate dynamics, arrogance creates distance. Confidence creates openness. One demands admiration, the other invites connection. Men may initially be drawn to intensity, but what they stay for is emotional ease. Confidence creates ease. This also explains why confidence often grows with self-knowledge. The more honest you are about who you are, your strengths, your limits, your values, the less you need to pretend. Pretending is exhausting. Confidence conserves energy because it's aligned. And alignment is the key word here. When your words, actions, and internal state match, you become coherent. People trust coherence. They feel safe around it. They don't have to guess where they stand. This coherence also sets the stage for communication. You can express desire without desperation. You can express boundaries without hostility. You can express interest without losing yourself. That balance is rare, and rarity increases value. If you're wondering how to cultivate this kind of confidence, the answer isn't external. It doesn't come from learning lines, techniques, or strategies. It comes from doing the internal work of self-approval, from deciding that your worth is not negotiable, from taking responsibility for your emotional state instead of outsourcing it. Confidence grows when you keep promises to yourself, when you act in alignment with your values, when you stop betraying your own boundaries for temporary validation. Each time you choose integrity over approval, confidence strengthens. And here's the most important part. Confident people don't try to be wanted. They allow themselves to be known. And being known is far riskier, but infinitely more rewarding. So if presence is about being fully there, confidence is about being fully grounded while you are. Together, they create a kind of quiet power that doesn't demand attention, but inevitably receives it. Because when you stop asking, "Am I enough?" and start living as if you already are, everything about how you connect begins to change. Communication is where most relationships quietly succeed or fail, not because people don't talk, but because they talk without understanding what communication is actually for. Many assume communication is about exchanging information, stating needs, expressing preferences, explaining feelings. But in intimate dynamics, communication is not primarily informational, it's relational. It's about whether the other person feels understood, respected, and emotionally oriented toward you rather than against you. Clear communication creates desire because desire grows in clarity. Confusion creates anxiety, and anxiety shuts attraction down. When someone doesn't know where they stand, they don't lean in, they protect themselves. And protection is the opposite of intimacy. One of the biggest mistakes people make is assuming that if something feels obvious to them, it should be obvious to the other person. But no two people share the same intern. Al Map. We each bring our own histories, assumptions, and unspoken expectations into connection. Communication is the process of making the invisible visible, not through force, but through articulation. Men often experience communication as either criticism or instruction, especially if it's delivered emotionally or indirectly. When communication feels like correction, it activates defensiveness. When it feels like clarity, it builds trust. The difference isn't in what's said, but in how it's grounded. Effective communication starts with self-awareness. If you don't know what you feel, what you want, or why you're reacting, you can't communicate cleanly. You'll speak in fragments, hints, sarcasm, emotional signals, hoping the other person decodes you. That's not communication. That's outsourcing responsibility. Psychologically, this creates instability. The other person is forced to guess, and guessing breeds insecurity. Clear communication removes the guessing. It replaces tension with orientation. It says, "This is where I am." You don't have to wonder. There's also a philosophical layer here about truth. Honest communication is an act of courage. It requires you to risk being misunderstood, rejected, or disagreed with. But avoiding that risk doesn't preserve connection. It slowly erodes it. Unspoken expectations turn into silent resentment. And resentment is one of the fastest ways to kill desire. Men tend to respond well to directness. Not harshness, not aggression, but clarity. Clear communication doesn't overwhelm, it simplifies. It doesn't demand mind reading. It doesn't test loyalty. It states reality and allows the other person to respond freely. This is crucial. Communication that creates desire is invitational, not coercive. It doesn't corner, it opens space. It leaves room for autonomy. When someone feels they have a choice, they engage willingly. When hey, feel pressured, they withdraw, even if they comply on the surface. A common fear people have is that being too clear will ruin the mystery. But mystery doesn't come from silence, it comes from depth. Silence without clarity feels confusing, not intriguing. Depth comes from revealing yourself thoughtfully, not from withholding. Communication also sets emotional rhythm. When someone speaks calmly and precisely, it regulates the interaction. When someone speaks reactively, emotionally, or vaguely, it dysregulates it. Men are particularly sensitive to this because emotional volatility often feels like unpredictability. Predictability creates safety. Safety allows desire to grow. Another misconception is that communication should be constant. In reality, timing matters more than frequency. Speaking at the wrong time, even with good intentions, can create resistance. Good communication respects context. It considers emotional readiness. It doesn't force resolution when regulation hasn't been restored. Listening is equally important here, but not in the passive sense people often mean. Real listening is active orientation toward understanding, not waiting for your turn to speak. When someone feels genuinely listened to, their defensiveness drops. Their openness increases, and openness is the gateway to intimacy. Men often feel unheard not because no one listens, but because they're listened to selectively, only for confirmation, not comprehension. When communication is used to win rather than understand, connection turns into competition. Desire doesn't survive competition. There's also a deeper issue of respect embedded in communication. How you speak signals how you see the other person. Do you assume competence or incompetence, goodwill or bad intent, strength or fragility? Those assumptions leak through tone, pacing, and word choice, and they shape how the message lands. Clear communication respects the other person's capacity to hear the truth. It doesn't infantilize. It doesn't dramatize. It doesn't manipulate emotion to get a response. It trusts that honesty is enough. From a psychological standpoint, communication that builds desire aligns inner experience with outer expression. When what you feel matches what you say, you become coherent. Coherence is attractive because it feels real. People trust what feels real. This coherence also prevents emotional buildup. When things are spoken early and cleanly, they don't metastasize into conflict. Small misunderstandings stay small. Needs don't turn into demands. Boundaries don't turn into ultimatums. And this is where communication intersects with confidence. Confident people communicate without over-explaining. They don't hedge every statement with apologies. They don't soften the truth to avoid disapproval. They speak plainly and allow others to respond as they will. Men tend to respond positively to this because it removes emotional labor. They're not decoding tone, guessing meaning, or navigating hidden expectations. They can relax into the interaction. Relaxation creates receptivity. It's also worth noting that communication isn't just verbal. Silence, body language, and responsiveness all communicate. Avoidance communicates disinterest. Withdrawal communicates punishment. Inconsistency communicates instability. These messages are often louder than words. Clear communication means aligning all channels. Saying yes with words but no with behavior creates confusion. Confusion kills trust. Trust is the soil desire grows in. There's also an ethical dimension to communication. When you communicate clearly, you give the other person accurate information to make decisions. You respect their agency. Manipulative communication, using ambiguity, guilt, or pressure, may get short-term compliance, but it destroys long-term desire. Desire thrives where there is freedom. Freedom requires information. Information comes from clarity. Many people avoid clear communication because they fear loss. But unclear communication guarantees loss, just slower and more painful. Truth spoken with respect has a chance to deepen connection. Truth avoided guarantees distance. This is especially important in moments of disagreement. Conflict doesn't kill desire, contempt does. Clear communication allows conflict without contempt. It separates behavior from identity. It addresses issues without attacking character. Men are more likely to stay engaged in conflict when they feel respected. Respect is communicated through tone, pacing, and restraint. Emotional flooding, raising volume, urgency, or intensity signals threat. Threat shuts down intimacy. Clear communication, by contrast, signals collaboration. It says we're on the same side even if we disagree. That orientation preserves desire even through difficulty. At a deeper level, communication is how you make yourself known, and being known is the foundation of intimacy. If you want closeness, you have to risk clarity. You have to say what's true, not what's safe. This doesn't mean saying everything impulsively. It means saying what matters deliberately. It means choosing honesty over comfort, but delivering it with care. When communication is grounded, desire doesn't have to be negotiated. It emerges naturally because both people feel oriented, respected, and free. So if presence is about being there and confidence is about being grounded while you are, communication is about making that presence and confidence intelligible to another person. It's the bridge between inner experience and shared reality. And the question worth leaving yourself with is this: are you speaking in a way that creates clarity, or in a way that protects you from discomfort? Because one builds desire and the other slowly dissolves it. Emotional safety is the quiet structure holding everything else together. Without it, presence feels fragile, confidence turns performative, and communication becomes defensive. With it, all three settle into something stable and sustainable. And yet emotional safety is rarely discussed clearly, even though it's one of the primary conditions for desire that lasts. Emotional safety doesn't mean comfort at all times. It doesn't mean avoiding conflict, protecting feelings, or cushioning every truth. It means something far more precise: the assurance that vulnerability won't be punished, that honesty won't be weaponized later, that mistakes won't be used as leverage. When someone feels emotionally safe, they don't have to brace themselves. They don't have to guard every word. They don't have to anticipate retaliation. And that absence of threat is what allows intimacy to deepen. Men, in particular, often experience a lack of emotional safety without having language for it. They may feel tension, pressure, or withdrawal without being able to articulate why. When emotional safety is missing, men tend to either shut down or overperform. They become distant, sarcastic, or overly agreeable. None of those are signs of disinterest. They're signs of self-protection. Psychologically, this makes sense. When a person anticipates judgment or emotional volatility, their nervous system shifts into defense. Curiosity narrows. Playfulness disappears. Desire fades, not because attraction is gone, but because safety is gone. Desire requires openness, and openness requires safety. One of the biggest misconceptions is that emotional safety is created through reassurance alone. Reassurance can help, but it's inconsistent if it's not backed by behavior. Emotional safety is built rough predictability through emotional regulation, through responding instead of reacting. When someone knows what emotional tone they're walking into, they relax. When they don't, they stay guarded. This is where emotional maturity matters. Emotional safety requires the ability to tolerate discomfort without escalating it, to hear something difficult without collapsing or counterattacking, to pause instead of pouncing. Men often test for this unconsciously. They pay attention to how conflict is handled, how disagreement is tolerated, how boundaries are respected, not because they're calculating, but because their nervous system is gathering data. Emotional safety also depends on respect. Respect for autonomy, respect for difference, respect for boundaries. When a man feels his preferences are mocked, minimized, or pathologized, he learns to withhold. When he feels pressured to be someone else to maintain peace, authenticity disappears. And without authenticity, intimacy becomes hollow. There's a philosophical element here that's worth acknowledging. Emotional safety is tied to truth. Not just speaking the truth, but allowing truth to exist without punishment. When truth is dangerous, people lie, sometimes subtly, sometimes completely. When truth is safe, people relax into honesty. Desire doesn't thrive in deception, it thrives in alignment. This is also why emotional safety is incompatible with manipulation. Guilt, silent treatment, emotional withdrawal, and strategic affection all undermine safety. They turn connection into a power game. And power games might create short-term compliance, but they destroy long-term desire. Men are especially sensitive to this because many already feel evaluated in the world. Their value is often tied to usefulness, performance, or results. When intimacy replicates that dynamic, where affection feels conditional, emotional safety collapses. They may stay physically present, but emotionally they disengage. True emotional safety communicates. You don't have to earn rest here. That doesn't mean effort disappears. It means effort isn't coerced. It's chosen. And chosen effort carries desire with it. Another misunderstood aspect of emotional safety is that it doesn't mean agreement. You can disagree deeply and still create safety. Safety comes from how disagreement is handled. Is it curious or contemptuous? Calm or chaotic? Focused on resolution or domination? Men tend to withdraw when conflict feels endless or emotionally overwhelming. They engage when it feels purposeful and contained. Containment is important. Emotional safety requires boundaries, not just physical, but emotional ones. Not every feeling needs to be acted on immediately. Not every thought needs to be expressed impulsively. Emotional safety grows when someone knows you can feel intensely without becoming unpredictable. This is where emotional regulation becomes foundational. Regulation doesn't mean suppression. It means you can experience emotion without being controlled by it. Men often find this deeply reassuring. It signals that intimacy won't turn into emotional chaos, that closeness won't cost them stability. There's also something profound about being accepted without being indulged. Emotional safety doesn't mean permissiveness. It means fairness. It means your feelings are acknowledged even if your behavior is challenged. That distinction matters. When someone feels seen rather than shamed, growth becomes possible. From a psychological perspective, emotional safety allows for exploration. When threat is low, curiosity increases. Playfulness returns. Desire becomes spontaneous rather than strategic. This is why emotionally safe relationships often feel lighter even when they're serious. There's room to breathe. Emotional safety also deepens trust, and trust is cumulative. It builds slowly through consistency, through showing up the same way in good moments and hard ones, through not using vulnerability as ammunition later. Each time trust is honored, desire strengthens. Each time it's violated, desire retreats. Men often remember moments when they opened up and it was used against them. Even once can create lasting caution. Emotional safety repairs that damage, not through words alone, but through time and restraint, through proving that openness won't be punished. There's also an internal dimension to emotional safety that's often overlooked. You can't offer safety you don't possess. If you're emotionally volatile, easily threatened, or dependent on reassurance, safety becomes fragile. Emotional safety starts with self-stability, with being able to sit with your own emotions without external regulation. This connects directly back to confidence. Confidence creates safety because it reduces emotional reactivity. It removes the sense that someone else is responsible for your emotional state. Men feel safer when they're not expected to manage someone else's feelings constantly. Emotional safety also allows desire to evolve. Early attraction is often fueled by novelty and intensity. Long-term desire is fueled by trust and freedom. Safety provides the container for that transition. Without it, relationships either burn out or stagnate. There's something deeply intimate about knowing you can be fully yourself without being abandoned or controlled. That knowledge changes how close people are willing to get. Men who feel emotionally safe are more expressive, more affectionate, more engaged. Not because they're pushed, but because they're free. It's important to say this clearly. Emotional safety is not about walking on eggshells. It's about creating an environment where eggshells aren't necessary, where honesty doesn't explode, where difference doesn't threaten. Connection. When emotional safety is present, communication becomes easier. Presence becomes deeper. Confidence becomes more natural. Everything reinforces everything else. It's not a single technique. It's a system. And this is why emotional safety isn't something you demand. It's something you demonstrate over time, consistently, in small moments that add up, in how you respond when things don't go your way, in how you handle disappointment, in how you treat vulnerability when it's offered. Men don't beg for emotional safety in words. They test for it in behavior. They lean in when they feel it. They pull away when they don't. Understanding that changes how you interpret distance, silence, or hesitation. Often, it's not lack of desire, it's lack of safety. If intimacy is about closeness, emotional safety is about permission. Permission to be real. Permission to be imperfect, permission to stay. And the question worth leaving with is this. When someone opens up to you, do they feel more protected or more exposed afterward? Because the answer to that question determines whether desire grows or quietly disappears.